It happened on my birthday. The candles were still burning when she looked me dead in the eye and said the words that cracked the room in half. "We don't need you anymore." Her voice was sharp, final, like the slam of a door you know won't reopen. My daughter, my own flesh and blood. She said it with a smile that wasn't hers, a smile I'd seen too many times on her mother's face. Everyone at the table laughed nervously, but I could feel the air shift. My wife placed her hand over our daughters like a director signaling the final act of a play I hadn't been told I was in. And in that moment, the villain of my life sat across from me, smug, glowing in the power of public humiliation. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just stared at the cake, its frosting too sweet, its flames flickering like police lights against the walls of my home. Narrator voice. They thought this would break me. But they had no idea what was coming next. The morning after my birthday, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked into the kitchen, where the faint smell of last night's frosting and burnt candles still lingered. The plates were stacked in the sink, the balloons half deflated, the streamers already drooping like tired soldiers after a battle. I'd always loved birthdays, not because of the gifts or attention, but because they were milestones, proof that I had endured, that my family had endured, another year together. But this year was different. This year, I woke up to a silence that felt more like exile than celebration. I was a simple man by most accounts. A project manager at a mid-sized construction company, the kind of job no one ever really asks about at parties. I worked with my hands, my schedule, and my word. I wasn't flashy, but I was dependable. For years, I carried the weight of keeping my family steady. Bills on time, roof fixed, car repaired before winter. My wife, Lila, was the opposite. Charismatic, magnetic, the center of every conversation. Where I preferred quiet dinners at home, she thrived on neighborhood events, family parties, and community meetings. And my daughter Emily inherited all of it. Her charm, her smile, her need to be admired. I didn't mind being in the background. I thought that's what strength was. Not needing applause, just quietly building a life for others to stand on. But sometimes silence makes it easy to erase the one holding everything together. It started small. At family gatherings, Lila would always make little digs. "Oh, you know your dad, he means well, but he's so old-fashioned." Or she'd compare me to other husbands. Louder, richer, more exciting. Everyone laughed, and I laughed too, because that's what you do. But each joke landed like a pin on a map, slowly charting the distance between us. Then came the neighborhood's homeowners association meetings. Lila loved them. The debates about landscaping, parking rules, community events. She thrived there, wielding influence with a polished smile. I went only when she begged me. I'd sit in the corner, offering practical solutions, fixing a fence, budgeting repairs, only to have her brush them off, steering the conversation to her own agenda. I saw the pattern. She wanted to be seen as the architect of our world, not me. The first real sting came 2 months before my birthday. Emily had entered a local art competition. I'd stayed up 3 nights in a row helping her finish the project, a model of the neighborhood made from cardboard, toothpicks, and paint. My hands were still sticky from glue when she presented it to the committee. They applauded her creativity, and Lila swooped in, claiming she'd been the one guiding Emily all along. "Of course I helped her," Lila said with a dazzling smile. "It runs in the family." I stood there, a smear of blue paint drying on my wrist, invisible. Emily looked at her mother with admiration, nodding, never mentioning me once. That was the night I started keeping small things. Proof, not for anyone else, but for myself. A photo of Emily asleep at the table while I painted rooftops beside her. A receipt from the hardware store for supplies. Even the piggy bank I'd given her years ago. A small ceramic house she used to fill with coins. She didn't use it anymore, but I kept it on the shelf in my study. To me, it wasn't a bank. It was a reminder. I was here. I gave. I built. The humiliation on my birthday wasn't an accident. It was the culmination of years of being pushed to the sidelines until I was no longer even on the stage. And as I stood over the sink that morning, staring at the frosting-stained plates, I realized something. If they could erase me so easily, what else were they capable of? And that was the moment the story truly began. It didn't take long for the whispers to begin. At first, I thought it was paranoia. The way neighbors would lower their voices when I passed by, the sudden hush at PTA meetings, the sideways glances when I pulled into the driveway after work. But whispers have weight, and soon I could feel them pressing against my back like a storm rolling in. Lila had a gift. She could take the smallest story and spin it into a headline. A late bill became, "He's irresponsible with money." My long hours at work became, "He doesn't care about his family." Even my quiet nature was twisted into, "He's cold." Maybe even dangerous. And the worst part? People believed her. Emily began to distance herself. She'd spend more time with her mother, less with me. When I asked if she wanted to go for ice cream like we used to, she hesitated. "Maybe another time, Dad. Mom and I already have plans." The words were polite, but her eyes avoided mine. I could feel the bond fraying, strand by strand. Nights grew heavier. I'd lie awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the pipes, my mind replaying every moment I might have failed. My chest felt tight, my breaths shallow. Stress doesn't just live in the mind, it carves into the body. My shoulders ached like I'd been carrying bricks all day. My heartbeat quickened at random, sharp as a hammer against wood. Still, I tried to hold my ground. I told myself, just endure, just stay calm. The truth always comes out, but truth is slower than lies. At the next HOA meeting, I offered to repair the community playground equipment. I had the tools, the time, and the experience. Before anyone could respond, Lila interjected with that smile, polished, rehearsed. "Oh, I don't think that's safe," she said sweetly. "He means well, but let's just say he's not the most reliable with projects." We don't want the kids getting hurt, do we? A ripple of laughter circled the room. My suggestion was brushed aside, and someone else was chosen for the job. I left that meeting feeling like I'd been erased in front of everyone. Again. The weight grew unbearable. I started eating less, sleeping less. My coworkers noticed I was distracted. One afternoon, while reviewing blueprints, my hands trembled so badly I had to set the paper down. That night, I sat in my study staring at the old piggy bank, the ceramic house Emily once loved. It was chipped at the corner now, faded with time. To anyone else, it was worthless. But to me, it was proof that I mattered, that I had given, that my role was real even if no one admitted it. I clenched it in my hands like a lifeline. Then, something unexpected happened. A week later, after another tense dinner where Emily barely spoke to me, I stepped outside for air. The sky was dark, heavy with clouds, the kind that swallowed the moon whole. As I leaned against the porch rail, a voice startled me. "You don't deserve this." I turned to see Mrs. Alvarez, our neighbor from across the street. She was a widow in her 60s, quiet but observant. She held out a small plate of cookies, her hands trembling slightly. "I've seen the way she talks to you," she said gently, "and the way people follow her lead. You're not the man they say you are." Her words cut through the fog like a beam of light. It wasn't much, just a neighbor's kindness, but it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't alone. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Narrator voice. That was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. And it wouldn't be the last. The storm broke faster than I expected. One Thursday evening, just as I was rinsing dinner plates, a hard knock rattled the front door. When I opened it, 2 police officers stood there, their blue lights flashing against the siding of my house. Neighbors peeked through blinds like vultures circling. "Sir, we received a call," one officer said. His voice was flat, professional. "A report of domestic disturbance." For a moment, my world tilted sideways. I glanced back into the house. Emily sitting stiff on the couch, Lila standing behind her with arms crossed, her face arranged in that perfect mask of concern. What?" I stammered. "There's no disturbance here." But the officers didn't look convinced. They walked inside, scanned the room, asked questions. Emily avoided my eyes. Lila spoke softly, just enough to imply things without saying them outright. That I'd been distant, that I sometimes lost my temper, that she was concerned for Emily's safety. Each word was a dagger wrapped in silk. The officers left after finding no evidence, but the damage was done. The sight of their flashing lights, the weight of neighbors watching, the seed of suspicion planted, it all lingered long after the door shut. That night I sat alone in the study staring at the piggy bank. My hands shook with rage and despair. I wanted to smash it, to let the shards scatter across the floor, but I didn't. Something inside me whispered, "Not yet, hold on, proof will matter." The next week, I found a letter taped to my car windshield, a petition signed by several neighbors, questioning whether I should remain on the HOA committee at all. Words like unstable, confrontational, and unreliable were scribbled in neat cursive. I knew exactly whose pen had started it. For the first time, hopelessness wrapped itself around me like a chain. I wondered if they were right, if maybe I was the problem, if silence and endurance had only made me complicit in my own erasure. Then something shifted. I found an envelope tucked under my office door at work. Inside was a note written in careful handwriting. "I don't believe what they're saying. If you ever need someone to back you up, I've seen enough to know the truth." It was signed, David, one of my coworkers, the same man who had seen my trembling hands over blueprints weeks before. I hadn't realized he noticed. That note lit a fuse. I began documenting everything, every insult at a meeting, every time Lila twisted a story, every receipt, every message, every witness. I started keeping a logbook in my study, dates, times, details. At first it felt paranoid, but the more I wrote, the clearer the pattern became. Control, humiliation, isolation, and then an advantage I hadn't expected. While sorting old files, I stumbled across the deed to the house. The name on it wasn't hers. It was mine. Years earlier, when we bought the place, Lila had insisted it was simpler for me to sign the paperwork while she handled the design and decor. At the time, it seemed meaningless. Now, it was leverage. I held that deed in my hands like a hidden sword. They thought they had boxed me in. They thought the stage was theirs alone. But I had proof. I had allies. And most of all, I had patience. Still, Lila didn't back down. When she sensed resistance, she didn't retreat. She pressed harder. The next HOA meeting, she announced a motion to replace me on the committee altogether. She smiled as if it were already decided, and for the first time, I didn't stay silent. "I'll contest that," I said evenly, my voice cutting through the room, "and I have documentation to support my position." The silence that followed was thick, electric. Lila's smile faltered for just a second, but then she doubled down. "Documentation?" She scoffed lightly. "Oh, I'm sure he's got something." The room chuckled nervously, but I saw it in her eyes, the flicker of doubt. Narrator voice. They thought they still had control. They didn't. From that moment on, it wasn't just survival anymore. It was war. Lila must have sensed the shift in me, because her attacks became louder, bolder. She wasn't content with whispers anymore. She wanted spectacle. Rumors sprouted like weeds. A neighbor overheard that I was drinking too much, though I hadn't touched a drop in months. Someone else claimed I'd been seen yelling at Emily in the yard, though I rarely raised my voice above a steady tone. False complaints trickled into the HOA inbox about my yard being unkempt, my car parked too long, my lack of participation. It was a smear campaign. Systematic, relentless. But this time, I didn't crumble. Every rumor, every complaint, every insult, I wrote it down. Dates, names, details. I filed them neatly in a binder. At night, I'd sit in the quiet study, flipping through the pages like a general studying enemy positions. And the piggy bank, that chipped ceramic house, sat on the desk beside me. Once a child's toy, now my symbol of patience. Each time I looked at it, I remembered. I built this. I provided. I was real, no matter how much they tried to erase me. Meanwhile, allies began to surface. Quiet ones at first. A father from the PTA who admitted he'd seen Lila bend stories before. Mrs. Alvarez, who began bringing me coffee during HOA meetings, her silent gesture of solidarity visible to everyone. And David, my coworker, who offered to testify about my character if things escalated legally. They reminded me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. Still, the toll was heavy. My nights were restless, haunted by imagined confrontations. My mornings began with knots in my stomach, wondering what new accusation would come. Some days, I felt like a man balancing on the edge of a collapsing bridge, waiting for the final plank to give way. But other days, I felt something new, a spark, strategy replacing despair. I started keeping recordings, screenshots of messages, copies of petitions. I learned about tenant rights, HOA laws, even brushed up on family law. My binder thickened, its weight a physical reminder that the truth was on my side, even if no one wanted to see it yet. And Lila? She was cracking. I noticed it first in her smile. The polished charm had a tremor to it now, like a mask slipping under heat. At the last HOA meeting, when she tried to cut me off mid-sentence, I calmly presented a receipt that contradicted her claim. The room shifted, not in my favor yet, but enough that her cheeks flushed. She didn't like being challenged, and she especially didn't like being caught. So she doubled down. She spread a new rumor, that I was hiding money. She hinted to Emily that maybe college funds weren't safe with me. And worst of all, she suggested that perhaps I shouldn't be trusted alone with decisions that affected the household. Those words hurt more than any rumor outside, because when your own child begins to doubt you, the battlefield isn't just public. It's inside your own home. Still, I pressed forward, because I knew what was coming. The date was set, a community meeting that would decide not only my position on the HOA committee, but also, indirectly, my reputation. Everyone would be there, neighbors, board members, even Emily. And Lila, of course, ready to deliver what she thought would be the final blow. Narrator voice. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. The night of the meeting, the air itself felt charged. The community center lights buzzed overhead, flickering like nervous heartbeats. Rows of folding chairs filled the room, every neighbor in attendance, their faces eager for drama. I sat near the front, my binder resting on my lap like a loaded weapon. Lila entered last, sweeping in with that familiar aura of control. Emily trailed beside her, eyes downcast. My wife's smile was radiant, confident. She thought this was already won. The chairperson called the meeting to order, and almost immediately, Lila raised her hand. "I'd like to bring up a matter of concern regarding my husband," she said, her voice honey-smooth. "His behavior has become unpredictable. For the safety and integrity of this community, I propose we vote on removing him from the HOA committee, effective immediately." A murmur spread across the room. All eyes turned toward me. For years I would have stayed silent, let her words sink in, let them write my story for me. But not tonight. Tonight, I stood. I have something to say. The room quieted. I opened the binder and placed it on the table, its pages heavy with months of documentation. For too long, I've let rumors define me. But tonight, I'm going to show you the truth. One by one, I laid out the evidence. The false complaints, matched against receipts proving they were baseless. Screenshots of Lila's messages, twisting facts to neighbors. Witness statements from Mrs. Alvarez and David. Each page fell onto the table with a sound that echoed in the silence, like nails driven into wood. And finally, I said, my voice steady, the deed to our home. In my name. The home I worked for, maintained and built for my family. Not hers, mine. Gasps rippled through the room. Lila's confident smile cracked. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to interject. This is manipulation, she stammered. He's twisting. But her voice was drowned out by the weight of the silence. People weren't laughing anymore. They weren't smiling politely. They were staring at her. I looked around the room, meeting eyes that had once only seen me through her words. You've heard her version for years, I said. But here's the truth. I have worked, quietly, consistently, to build this community, to build my family, and I will not be erased. Not anymore. Emily's head lifted at that, her eyes flickering between us. I saw doubt unraveling in her expression, the first threads of realization pulling loose. Lila's voice grew shrill. You can't believe him. He's dangerous. But the more she protested, the more her mask slipped. The polished charm was gone, replaced by frantic desperation. Her empire of control was crumbling in front of everyone, and she knew it. The chairperson cleared his throat. I think we've heard enough. His gaze shifted toward me, firm but respectful. The evidence speaks for itself. The room murmured in agreement. Lila slumped into her chair, her face pale, her hands clenched so tight, her knuckles turned white. For the first time in years, she wasn't in control. I turned toward her, my voice calm, final. I don't want apologies. I want change. The room fell into stunned silence. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not over others, but over myself. Narrator voice. That night, the empire she built on lies collapsed, and in its ruins, I found my voice. The days after the meeting felt lighter, as though years of storm had finally cleared. Neighbors who once looked at me with suspicion now stopped me with a nod, a handshake, even a quiet, glad you stood up for yourself. Lila, once untouchable, was no longer the queen of the stage. At the store, people avoided her eyes. At HOA meetings, her voice faltered, her charm powerless without an audience. Her mask had cracked. At home, silence stretched. But one evening, Emily placed the chipped piggy bank on the table. Her voice shook. I didn't realize you kept it. I kept it, I told her, because it reminded me who I was, even when no one else did. From that night, the mending began. I framed the house deed, fixed the old fence, replaced the broken lock. Each act was more than repair. It was reclaiming. Lila's downfall wasn't loud. It was quiet erosion, and in her emptiness, I finally saw she only ever thrived on control. I didn't need to fight her anymore. The war was over. Emily began using the piggy bank again, not for coins, but for gratitude notes. Our bond, cracked but not broken, was healing. Narrator voice. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. If you've listened this far, maybe you felt it too. The sting of favoritism, the chill of betrayal, the slow erosion of worth when someone decides your story doesn't matter. But here's the truth I had to learn the hard way. Worth isn't given. It isn't granted by applause or approval or the smiles of people who only see what they want to see. Worth is claimed. Quietly, firmly, without apology. So I'll ask you this. Have you ever faced someone who tried to erase you? Who used power, lies, or control to make you smaller? And more importantly, how did you rise above it? Share your story. Because together we remind each other of one truth. Worth isn't something they give you. It's something you claim for yourself.